що приєдналися, чекали Ярослава Юрчишина. Він
We are ready to wait for Mr. Yaroslav Yurchyshyn, and today we're going to be discussing the Ukraine's recovery, and this is expert discussion. Today is the eve of the 8th of March, International Women's Rights Day. That's why the NGO Women in Media, in collaboration with the Government Commissioner for Gender Equality Policy, the Ministry of Culture of Information Policy of Ukraine, and our partners, we conduct this roundtable discussion in order to focus on the importance of gender equality coverage in Ukrainian media. And finally, Yaroslav joined us. So today we're going to present to you the monitoring of online media and Yedini Novini United News Marathon as part of the gender-based violence and conflict-related sexual violence discussion in media. So today we hope it's going to be interactive discussion as a dialogue, so please ask questions, and the floor goes to Kateryna Levchenko, Government Commissioner for Gender Policy. By the way, it's interesting that Ms. Kateryna, during this monitoring, she was called that she's leading in terms of citations and coverage of the broader number of topics well ahead of any male speakers. Thank you. And thank you, Lisa. Thank you, colleagues. Good afternoon. You know what? I will give my introductory remarks as a reflection on the report which I read with huge pleasure, and that's my first reflection already, that it was a pleasure to read and hear the words to describe it: important, interesting, relevant, innovative, high profile and professional. And unfortunately, it's not often that nowadays you can find a research paper that could be described with so many characteristics. So I'm grateful to everyone who conducted this research, this monitoring, NGO Women in Media, the expert on gender policy, the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine as well, because what we need is not only the research but a high quality research. And how to guarantee quality, it's not easy, but you managed to do that, and that's why I am grateful to you for that, because it's going to be used, it's going to be referenced to. So we want to avoid any erroneous conclusions based on poorly validated data. So I support the words of the authors of this research paper, who say that we want to go away from simplifying the reality, because the existence of stereotypes and biases creates a simplified reality, which in simple words could be broken down in black or white or rose and gray, but our life is much, much more complicated, and such research should help us, such studies, to get away from such simplified perception of the world, because such worldview does not allow you to efficiently implement the gender equality policy, because the focus is on persons, but of what age, what gender, where resides, what are the needs, any disabilities, and other characteristics have not been taken into consideration previously through simplified lens. This study provides arguments to verify and demonstrate that we have working documents in place. The Gender Equality Communication Strategy and its action plan. These documents gave the impetus to bringing this whole topic into focal point, because that's what the whole strategy is all about. This communication strategy paper, it adds a number of laws and cabinet ministers' resolutions that, like the national strategy for gender equality, the educational gender equality strategy, the strategy for bridging the gap in gender payments, carrying out the 1325 resolution of the Council of Europe, and so the list goes on and on. And for me, as the government commissioner, this is extremely important, that the documents are not only passed, but that they enforced and implemented. And this national policy has been implemented based on the principle as a mainstream policy covering each sphere of public governance. What I'm talking about, it's not only just one ministry, or sometimes even social security and personnel departments in line ministries should be responsible for this. No, the gender approach should be everywhere, in recovery, infrastructure, mass media, healthcare, education, finances, anywhere. And this comprehensive nature of our approach is exactly what the monitoring touches: violence, war, recovery. And a bit of a spoiler before the presentation. Of course, I would not repeat or echo all of the conclusions, but while reading the monitoring paper, I recognize that some of the statements require more in-depth comments, because the existence of a position is more important. Reasoning behind being on the TV screen becomes a more important rationale than the experts' merits. So how can we ensure that there are more women employed to important positions? But on the other hand, we need to work with mass media to invite more female experts, or a completely equal division of male and female experts among those who comment on traditional male and traditional female topics. About 83% of men comment social topics and heavy industry or war. And there are unexpected results as well. For instance, I haven't seen here any references to well-known personalities in gender equality arena, or any reminders of large communications campaigns on prevention of violence in particular, or limited methodology, or they don't work with the mass media outlets, all of them, and further steps. I'm grateful to our donors for their support, and hopefully this will be a consistent support, because we need such research conducted on a regular basis. Of course, you can improve on the methodology, you can increase the number of the mass media outlets covered by the survey, but for me, this paper would lay the foundation, because recalling when back in 2023, 83% of men and only 17% of women were among experts on all the different topics. But our job to make sure that every year, year in, year out, this would become more proportional, because it's all about equal rights, equal opportunities, and equal presence in media sphere. So once again, thank you for this paper. It will come handy. Thank you, Kateryna. The partner initiator of this research was the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, and I give the floor to Taras Shevchenko, Deputy Minister of Culture and Information Policy for European Integration. Thank you, Lisa. Hello, everyone. Being a Deputy Minister in charge of European integration, I want to reiterate that gender equality topic follows the backbone standards and values of the European Union. That's why it's only fair that the focus of the efforts of both government and non-government organizations are aimed at reaching the highest indicators in this particular parameter. And I'm grateful to all of those who are instrumental in promoting this topic, all the practitioners. We have quite a proactive civic society, and by the way, today is an important date. 10 years ago, on that date, the reanimation package of reforms coalition have been announced. I can see Yaroslav Honcharenko, Yaroslav Yurchyshyn, and we worked in that coalition together with other guys. So that was the coalition of NGOs, and when their efforts are united, they can reach the best results by lobbying and advocating certain topics, by finding certain solutions, and jointly celebrating success. It's important to stay systemic here. That's important for us to stay within the strategy paper. This is the concept of gender equality. By the way, concept paper or strategy paper, you can call the documents one way or another, but in essence, these are all strategic level documents, and thus it has an action plan approved by the cabinet and ministers, and among those who will execute this action plan, there are lots of line ministries and agencies, but we and the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy are responsible for this paper, but we are delivering together as part of the coalition. The research that was conducted and will be presented raises an important layer of issues: stereotypes, representation of experts, gender-oriented, gender-based violence, a very relevant, unfortunate topic in a time of hostilities, but unfortunately even after the victory, the topic of violence would not disappear. It would stay relevant for all the obvious reasons. The gender mainstreaming, which is part of the European integration effort and part and parcel of Plan Ukraine facility. This is yet another topic that should become business as usual for the ministries and agencies, so that not only the discussions would be divided based on gender principles, but that this topic becomes an inalienable part of any topic of discussion. An important role is played by mass media, which could shape positive narratives, on the other hand, could disseminate stereotypes and deepen the problems. Another huge challenge of ours is that media, that according to the new law on media, its covers now online media, which has not been qualified as media before, but the audience of consumption now is more focused on the use of Telegram channels, which are not qualified as media, and according to the ethics and the standards they operate that's quite dubious. So that's still the message, because the standards of dissemination of information and the ethical journalist ethics, by the way, Lisa is the member of the Journalist Ethics Committee. So all the news that are covered not only in Telegram channels but in Viber or WhatsApp channels, uh, could it be labeled journalism? But still, the source of news number one are such channels. Once again, I would like to thank Kateryna, Women in Media, TCA, USAID, and those organizations that were instrumentally involved in writing this report, and Ms. Kateryna Levchenko, who is the leader, who is the trailblazer of this whole topic. Thank you for an expressive presentation. I would like to remind you, Mr. Taras, how back in 2019 we worked at the strategic sessions drafting these documents involving NGOs. There was a common effort at that time, and those findings that have been delivered in synergy with civic society and international partners, they turn out to be most valuable. Thank you. And Yaroslav Yurchyshyn, Chair of the Verkhovna Rada Committee on Freedom of Speech and Information. Yeah, thank you for such well-detailed report. I'm still reading through it, but it's already started me thinking. When we are asked about the progress on gender equality and presence in media, well, I believe that United News, Jedyne Noviny and online media, they cover news differently, but only working together, involving the general public and the authorities, we will ensure the better balance. Lots of issues resonate. Often enough, the MPs try to learn how many bills go through the gender equality analysis, and unfortunately that's minimum minimorum, not because of the lack of experts, but because this issue becomes secondary, claiming that in the time of war stereotypes should not be the top priority, but the war hasn't changed anything. It's like a magnifying lens, and if we analyze the representation of women in covering the most acute topic, the topic of war, well, you can see what's the level of the representation of women in the armed forces and as spokespersons in particular. What I would like what I'm lacking right now is that the time will come when the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy together with international partners would be ready to survey regional media. Why it's important? Because that's where people live, in the regions. And there is a huge demand from the regional journalists who just lack expertise and thus refuse to file such acute topics as domestic violence and sexual-based violence. And just imagine if you would have at the regional media to write about the gender-based violence. Forget it. There are exceptions to this rule, and it will be only 1% of what we cover as important topics. And in a lot of indicators like this, the statistics are just staggering. So I would like to first of all thank for the results that have been already put ink on paper, and it sets the road signs where we should be moving. Well, of course, in a traumatized society, stereotypes are deeper anchored, but war is when people reconsider their worldviews, and even though it's logical, but the female military uniform design by women for women has been presented only recently. Now we are discussing about body armor for women. So again, by women for women. And when we have discussed the balance of male and female representation in our political party, and we're the only one that has 50-50, even though the leadership of our factions are women. And the key issue being that when we started this discussion, at a certain point of time, we have seen that our leaders are sitting silent, and we asked them, how come? And then we learned, and that will be the end of my introductory speech. So the lady said, why are you talking for us? Just sit and listen. And that's why, that's all from me. I might be answering questions as directly to me, but now I'm here to listen. We need to make sure that our kids live in the society with less stereotypes, with more respect to people despite any subjective or objective traits, allowing people to be valuable. So thank you for this report. We'll be looking for regional reports as well. Thank you. And now the brief reflection about the qualification of regional editorial houses. Well, regional media is very qualified. They spend enough time for training and enhanced professional training. It's just that often enough is the jack of all trades in small editorial rooms, and mobilization and recruitment also plays into the fact that with the absence of the advertisements revenues, media are not choosing the topics under the discussion solely because of the absence of resources. So hopefully international partners could help them to write such materials. Like Ukrainian Cultural Fund, we need Ukrainian media front to help them out. Well, I'm not saying that they're not ready to write. It's not about people, but about the media, regional media at large. Of course, there are lots of those media that are just not considering those topics as the focus of their attention, but it's true, we need some additional mechanisms so that not only leaders would know how to talk about those topics, but that it would become the standard for the profession. Yep. And there was a teaser for this research paper. So Timur Levchuk, advisor on gender equality and social inclusion, USAID TC, and then Roman Zakharchenko. Well, thank you, and it's great to hear positive responses to this monitoring paper. It's great that people might find something useful for them, because transformation communications activity project of USAID is aimed at using those results for tangible purposes. That's why it's great that the ministry kept this in mind, recognizing that the results of the survey will be converted into some tangible steps. And today's roundtable discussion would hopefully generate some new ideas, and hopefully this is not the last monitoring effort. Well, here was the request for regional monitoring efforts, and we need to start evaluating whether we're reaching some progress so far. And the biggest insight for me in this monitoring effort was very low representation of women in the topic of science. In academia, of course, there are so many female scientists, and they need to be heard and visible. That's it. Oh, no, one more thing. I would like to thank NGO Women in Media and Lisa Kuzmenko, who brings us together, tries to coordinate our efforts, bring the alike-thinking people, those who also want to see the changes through. And Artem Zakharchenko, CAT-UA NGO head. Communications Analysis Team Ukraine, CATS Ukraine, we operate from day one of full-fledged invasion to provide telecommunications support to the government, and it was great when we were requested to analyze the representation of women and coverage of gender problems in media. And we communicated with Timur, first of all. He stated the task and the wishes, but it became clear that Timur just spearheaded the findings of those who worked on the strategy. So this survey was conducted not for the sake of survey, but with the hope that it would have some tangible results in delivering on strategic plans. Of course, feedback is important, because as in that old joke, it's tough but not that tough. The reason why the media are covering this topic the way they do is not the lack of qualification of the journalists, but the situation in the country at large. Men are much more frequently speak persons, not only on science, and they are spokespeople to VIP officials who are predominantly males. When Western media covers Ukraine, you can see that in those countries there are so many female spokespersons, The Ukrainian society at large is a bit backward in the daily treatment of gender equality, and media is just the mirror of the situation. Now, let's try to go through the monitoring research paper itself, with the help of the clicker. Artem, can you please tell us what was the volume of data processed, sampling approaches, and all that? Guidelines? We had a couple of samplings done. We had 2 samplings of most general, generic online media. We took top 50 media for that, and separately we had media of TV news coverage in United News, Jedyne Nowiny, Marathon. Again, not all the TV slots, but only news slots as more realistic, where we surveyed how big is the attention to male or female speakers and other sensitive topics. What are the current problems with the representation of female problems on the air? And those problems would be domestic violence, gender-based violence, conflict-based violence, and thus we had a couple of samplings like that with separate sets of conclusions. Now let me move to the generic overview. There are still facts of discrimination and favoritism of women, but they are predominantly present in the media that previously failed to comply with the journalism standards. So, if media already complies with those standards, then the probability is low that those facts would be present there. While various publications without reputation, as we say, not on the whitelist of Ukrainian media, well, sometimes because of the low journalist skills, or sometimes trying to go for clickbait reaction. And it all depends on the topic, because science and technologies, 100% of spokespersons are men. But again, that's the Ukrainian society to you, when girls from childhood are being told science is not for you. Sometimes journalists have biases themselves. When choosing whom to ask, they most likely would ask a man. As to the roles in the materials, officials in Ukraine are mostly men. And when we observe any discrimination, lookism, various epithets towards women, inappropriate, almost 90% of materials contain such infringements against women, and only around 10% in respect to men. SMPK and violence. So we do have certain coverage by media to the GBV and CRSV topics because of the official communications and communications cutting from public organizations. As to this magnifying glass that Artem mentioned, when it magnifies all the relevant problems. So media exists in this alarm mode for so long when they have to cover the constant shellings, hostilities in various settlements. Often enough, in online media news slot, it's difficult to add any problems not related directly to war effort. And as the result, the support of those topics becomes so much more important. So, I mentioned samplings already. Now about the methodology. Manual coding. People, not artificial intelligence, were involved. Then, when we quoted someone, we would learn the position of those persons, witness or victim, the facts of discrimination, etc. And those methods of data were processed in order to assess whether this whole topic has been properly covered, whether it has been pessimistic, something bad happened and they decided to resolve those problems somehow, or whether the problem has been discussed in greater detail and how deep was the focus on gender-related issues. So let's not cover all of the conclusions here, but at least we'll cover the key ones. So, how often online media in Ukraine cover gender-related topics is only 1%. You have subjective and objective reasons for that I covered. About 1% of discrimination or various traits of discrimination contained in the materials like lookism, gender stereotypes and other problems. Lookism, then stereotypes, and then objectivation, when they describe the appearance of men or women, and often enough it's women. Everywhere the focus is on, in terms of spokespersons, are far ahead, especially in science and technology, except for social life coverage. In the category eyewitness, mostly they are men. Everywhere where you need to have some expert opinion or choose somebody with higher position, they choose predominantly men. But women are mostly witnesses, witnessing shellings and other hostilities-related coverage. Again, another gender stereotype that women are more emotional on the screen. They will be able to convey better some emotion, and that's why journalists choose women for that role. since abroad, so when we talk about the positions in international organizations, they represent the officers, again, we have mostly women in those positions. But back to key spokespersons only, in the second dozen we have women. In terms of the number of quotes, Hanna Mahler, 1% of all the materials, of all the quotes, and less than 1% Ursula von der Leyen. Well, of course, Zelensky leads because of his position, the Minister of Defense, Kuleba, Sinegubov, Kharkiv Governor, Shmygal placed 5th, Ignat, others, so either top officials, leaders of the state, or heads of military agencies. And in the time of war, they are the ones who have been quoted most oftenly, but it's once again demonstrates a lower level of representation of women here. And Hanna Mahler falls way behind her boss. Well, the then leader, Mr. Reznikov. What was the timeline that your survey covered? And Kateryna asks, how come Vice Prime Minister Stefanishin is not here? 31st of January, 31st of July last year. So Reznikov was still in the position of the minister at that time. You never know why she is not. Yeah, the European integration topic has not probably been covered by media as much as the war topic. It's not because of the sampling. Okay then, where can we download this report? Probably that's the question to Timur. It will be published at the website of the ministry soon. And you can email me and I will share it with you individually. Now, let's cover the United News. So the United News Marathon. The situation is slightly better here than on the average in media, because the marathon here is like at the level of the middle level of attention. The level of compliance with standards is normal, but there are still a couple of pending problems. The focus on gender topics. Similar, no facts of discrimination in the materials we analyzed, so there was more than 1% there, and no here. The general breakdown is more or less the same on topics and such, but and here Hanna Mahler is ranked second on the list of spokespersons, which is a positive trend. And in terms of United News Marathon, the coverage of gender equality topic because this topic was mostly covered by 1+1 channel journalists. Well, my question is not about 1+1. Only 1% of the materials cover gender inequality topic, which is a nightmarish figure, but those materials covered only the infringement of women's rights, but we monthly control the number of NGOs and public initiatives on this topic. So, because it was about violence, right? About the cases and the involvement of the law enforcement, but the topic is much broader. No, 1% is not that much, but on the other hand, it's a lot. Well, how much they discuss agriculture or Crimea? No, that's why I clarified. How narrowly do you use the term gender inequality? Because the percentage should be more, even though if you talk about the cases and the proceedings, yeah, it's the protection of women's rights. When we try to cover something or initiate something, we believe that they're important for certain strata of our audience, and we have to follow the merciless statistics, namely that it's only 1% of all the news covered in our media. So, Starlight Media, Suspilny. So let's give the floor to Starlight representative. We have heard Ms. Yana. You, as the Director of Communications and Sustainable Development at Starlight Media, would probably know more. Yeah, first of all, thank you for this research, and it's valuable to us because Starlight Media in the last 2 years we have corporate system of general audits of our experts in our studio, and last year in 23 we had a higher level of representation of women in our studio. It's only 30% though, and even though it's way above the average, that's when we started this, we thought that in a couple of years' time we will reach at least 45%. And let me make a step back. Often enough we hear that media is the mirror of society. And I was thinking to me, metaphorically speaking, and the natural mirrors could be merciless to girls and women because they see the societal expectations about the appearance, behavior, profession you choose, your role in the household, in the society. So conducting the dialogue now, how media could be not only the mirror, but the driver, the creator and highlighter of role models. Because women operate everywhere, especially our heroines in the forces of security and defense. Even though there are fewer represented there now, but just imagine how many stereotype barriers they have to overcome and how many challenges they face daily. Well, this would call for our greater efforts to cover their commitments. So when we talk about gender equality, I see a slight note of irony here. Yeah, there are lots of commercial channels and lots of TV shows still contain gender stereotypes. And in terms of systematic approach, that's what we want to achieve. And it's all about how our corporate and editorial policies cover this topic. Since 2019, we launched corporate's program on support of gender equality. We didn't start with the content first. We worked with the team first. And once you conducted a survey saying how many women are executives in Ukraine, how many of them are chief editors, and we need to learn that. And that's what we're doing annually. The audit of representation of women on different managerial positions in Starlight Media, thus trying to evaluate access to pre-final editorial decisions. So in Starlight Media News Division, our panel has editors. It's 50-50, men and women. Guest studios. There was internal initiative of Starlight to audit our own compliance, our own commitment to support women, and whether we live up to our commitments. And our guest studio and Vadim Karpyak and fantastic Yana Brydzejska, they are people with very precise moral and ethical compass. They are true ambassadors of gender equality in Ukrainian society. And thanks to them, Starlight is among the leaders. And we met with Xiao Media Group that asked why 30%. 30%, if you look deeper, which sectors women are more represented. Well, okay, social and human rights, fine. But more science-related projects is what we now are thinking about. So there are three levels. On the one hand, public commitment of media, even though most of the critics start with, well, you've promised, yeah, and it's a fair criticism, and we improve on our feedback mechanisms. This second level, involvement of more women in editorial rooms, and finally, constant monitoring and the readiness to do more. So I'd like to thank you for this survey, and it's inspired us to probably think that we don't need to evaluate experts, but to look at the number of cases and materials that we cover in our media. And as part of corporate audit this year we will start evaluating the performance indicator of gender-related materials. Our team will increase its exposure to this topic by attending specialized training and through partnership with civil society, like Eurofem NGO, and we work as a pair. When our colleagues there say, we have an important topic, we need informational support, and it helps us, because that's highly sensitive, and EU-FM does have the expertise and qualification to set the right tone for such materials. And during the program 16 days of gender-based violence, we of course observed the spike of the materials on those specialized days, of course. And even though we talk about the journalist materials and interviews mostly here, but in terms of the responsibility of media, we have other types of products. In the marathon, we have the slot of social advertisement, where we invest in countering stereotypes and discrimination of men and women. We shot a couple of documentaries last year how to counter domestic violence in the time of war. So we need to keep track of all the capabilities and possibilities that might arise. Thank you, Yana, and thank you for such an inspirational speech from private, huge media holding. Iryna Slavinska, executive producer of Radio Kultura, and we know that Suspilny is the leader on many issues, and in particular, lots of programs dedicated to women's rights. And in 2022, Suspilny passed the separate policy on gender equality and non-discrimination their channel. So, here's your presentation, Ira. Yeah, I'm honored to be in this company because the reality we live in changes so fast. As a journalist, I remember how life was back in 2012, 2013, and one of the first events that I organized dedicated to women in media, often enough would be reacted by the editors as, well, come on, everything is nice and dandy with us, so we don't want to be involved. But now, everybody recognizes that it's not only adherence to the standards, but the sheer commitment to this topic. And Suspilny experience is something that I'm proud to share with you today. Well, we represent lots of media actually. Suspilny is not just one TV channel, even though that's probably what you think. No, it's a number of TV channels, news, Suspilny, culture, sport, and the ecosystem of local TV and radio broadcasting channels. All those regional media mentioned today operating in TV, radio, and digital space. We have 4 radio stations and large package of digital platforms, Suspilny Noviny site, the websites of our regional broadcasters, as well as sports and culture, podcasts, and such assets as Eurovision and educational and kids programs on YouTube. Also, our presence in social networks, content created by our editors, not by anonymous bloggers. So that's our scale of different media and contact with different audiences. Now, a nuclear thing that unites all that and carved in stone in such document that Lisa mentioned, the policy of gender equality and non-discrimination, this became DNA of Suspilny. Among our values, human rights, countering discrimination and ensuring of gender equality, this is the motto that you can find on the walls of Suspilny. That we fight and protect freedoms in Ukraine, human rights, freedoms and justice. For our team, these are not just words. Now, how do we operate? There are a couple of areas how we structure our work. Let me start with content. That's not the only way we move forward, but one of the important ones. And let me remind you about the documents that outline this work. It sounds boring, but those who worked with real teams know that unless you have formalized frames and reference points and milestones, nothing would happen. So Suspilny has some papers that help us to uh, learn more how to treat this topic, even for newcomers. So the policy of gender equality and non-discrimination, by the way, a brief document, only 8 pages, but it sets the frames, how to work with the content and as part of the teams. Our editorial statute is an important document. It's important because it more pages and describes the clear challenges that might exist, and now instead of guessing we can just follow those guidelines. Another important institution is the editorial council that I have the pleasure of chairing. And ideologically, all our work in previous years has been built around being the place where, not of a punitive nature, but people can come to us with questions and for advice. And finally, the policy of how to cover national minorities topic. So, even though it's not directly related, but we all know that it's important to hear the voices of women on that topic in particular. So, the statute. All last year, we have been changing our editorial statute to meet the new law that came into force in March last year. So the wording that you can find at the website of Suspilny will be changed. It will not be the way it was published. During springtime it will happen, but the most important thing that stays the same is the phrase that echoes with what I started my presentation with. The Suspilny materials should not discriminate anyone by gender, orientation, color skin, race, age, educational background, disability level, place of residence, language or other specificities. The DNA of Suspilny is to combat discrimination. And this is the only formula that would make sure that our audience recognizes itself in what we prepare. Now, how to work with a team? We recognize that you cannot work only with the content without improving the situation with your team. So we have 3,500 people, employees, 55% of them are women, 54.44%, and 45.5% are men. There are more managers, 54% are executives, women, and 45, almost 46% are men on the managerial positions. So these are fresh data that human resources shared with me. So how do we all work together? We have a number of principles. No to discrimination, the friendly atmosphere of dialogue, so no punishment or punitive elements, more like coaching, mentorship, advising and consulting, helping to grow professionally and otherwise. And we have the ethics committee in Suspilny, which looks at the potential violations of non-discrimination policy. So we have the editorial board that I chair as well. And in conclusion, at Suspilny we try to create a space where we can stay together, be together, and we would learn from the report that has been presented today. We have the internal monitoring of content. For that we have a special department within Suspilny. Also, those who create dictionaries, glossaries, stuff like that, send it to us. We also work a lot on internal training efforts because we have experts on human rights, and you can ask any of those colleagues for advice or to conduct the workshop on something that is not that well understood. So that's briefly of what Suspilny is doing. Thank you for attention. Thank you, Ira. And the next slot for us is the presentation of Coalition Gender Equality in Ukrainian Media. So we have independent media here, people from the authorities, NGOs, and the idea was that it's important for us to work together, not NGO separately, media separately, authorities separately, but to see what we can do together. We have Roman Kifluk, the advisor on gender equality and social, Roman Kifluk, national advisor for Ukraine from International Media Support, and we signed the memorandum between media, NGOs, and authorities. Of course, formal papers is one thing, but roundtables like today is the tangible example how the Eurofem, Women in Media, Regional Press Development, Democratic Reform Media Center, Громадське радіо, Rubrika, Detector Media, Media Group, Накипіла, Дівоча група, Ukrinform, Suspilny, and the Government Commissioner and the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy co-signed that memorandum. And that's why it's important for international partners to support the initiatives that unite so many forces. Well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to this event. And 3 times I changed the wording of my speech, and let me start reflecting from the end. So we are all delighted with what you're achieving at Suspilny, and Artem has mentioned that it's men who are mostly asked for directions, but in one of the Oriental countries, the recommendation was that if you want to ask someone, ask a lady. A lady, if she knows where to, she would tell you. If she doesn't know, she would say, I don't know. But the man would not tell you, I don't know, never, and would just show you to an accidental direction, not necessarily. That's probably from India. No. Truth be told, I don't remember which particular country it was, but there are many of them with so many stereotypes and biases, and it presents a huge problem. My deceased dad liked to call TV set the box. So, and then I read a metaphor that the importance of the box is what's inside it. If you put garbage in, well, garbage out. If you put diamonds, well, it will become the jewel box. The same is true with our media. Whatever is inside our media, that's what they're gonna be. There are heated discussions right now in media community. The topic of romance, and they say that the editor should be what the society should be tomorrow. We all want to be democratic society with independent media, ethical media, so gender balance is part and parcel of all that. And what we are discussing right now, and being proud of the results, yeah, that's the right thing to do. We need to celebrate our positive results, and devaluation is what prevents us from growing. So we need to value what we achieve, and we need to celebrate it in events like today because it's important. And We just need to move on with what's being achieved and praise those who achieve even more. So the establishment of coalition MS has supported this project, and it's great that the Democracy Fund has already found the opportunity to support this project financially. A great place to show that we're not on our own. That's not just Lisa and women in media are promoting this topic and tries to prove to you why it's so important. No, actually in this society the huge changes are happening, and we need to talk about those changes and be proud of progress and cover it more, because something that we believed was impossible yesterday is possible now. It's about trust, it's about freedom of expression, fight with stereotypes, lots of things like that. So I'm extremely grateful. Lots of things still to do to have constitutional approach like Suspilny and Starlight Media doing, to do it systemically, not just put down fires. So strategical approach sooner or later will yield results. It's a long way to wait, but it will be, I believe, successful, because we have no other choice but to be successful. Thank you, Roma. There is Anastasia Rudenko with us, editor-in-chief at Ukrainian media Rubrika.com, co-founder of the media network Window of Recovery. So how do you cover the gender component? Hello everyone, and I would also like to start with thanks, not only for the paper, but for how you formulated the topic under discussion, the gender dimension in the materials that cover war and afterward recovery. So I am the one who represents regional media from Donetsk and Lugansk region, and I would like to echo what we heard today already, that there are many strong players here in Kiev, but in the regions as well, who don't want to publish stereotypes or biased materials, but are proactive by raising the need for the standards and are trendsetters. And it's great that today we discuss not only the problem, but possible ways of resolving the mechanics and the frame that needs to be set, and the system within which we need to operate. We have discussed the unification of efforts today, and I am a true proponent of that, because when it's impossible to win through unilateral leadership, it's all about teams and networks. And back to regional media, when in 22nd of January we launched the Window of Recovery, the first open calls were raised by more than 80 regional media. Quite a lot. These are the teams. They want to be among the trailblazers there. Sometimes people ask me, is it time to discuss recovery, but in frontline territories, according to our survey that we did in 2023, are in top 3 of what people want to read about. And media request it, and it's important to create conditions so that, like today's topic suggests, the gender dimension would be respectively presented to avoid making unneeded mistakes of underrepresentation, for instance. And in this context, again, modern era media, well, it was more than we could safely process. And I agree that we will continue working uh, on our programs, but there's a content fund that to those partners who want to create such materials as part of the recovery effort, it's important for us not only to combine them in one place, but media people, but from the very beginning we have coordinated with women in media, and thank you for aggregating around you all the line organizations and needed expertise. I am confident that we need not only to network and saturate the information space with high quality content, but organizations would like to do that, but often enough being in their bubbles, or we need to make them more visible, those organizations, to one another first of all. That's why we have created the Winds of Recovery as media network, and we try to create the place for synergy with your coalition in particular, and that's what the future is all about. I heard a lot of interesting stuff from what we discussed today, and I believe, it's great to formalize the policy and to make it part and parcel of the statement that the organizations will join and then control how they live with that. And on the topic of recovery, there will be lots of topics about women leaders and specific problems associated with recovery. Thank you. And now let's start with reflections. There's Elena Yusik from Ludin and Zmina NGO, part of our coalition. They operate separately, covering various topics. Well, NGO Zmina is the Human Rights Protection Center, and one of the topics, women's rights protection, protection of LGBT community rights, protecting the rights of people with disabilities, and media. Media, quite popular, lots of people read it, and it's a great cooperation. They carry out human rights projects and then cover it in media, in their own media. This media covers all the facts of discrimination, sexism, hate speech, so you can read about such facts. In our top news is the mayor of Ivano-Frankivsk, as it happened, and it's great that this coalition is on. We're not only joining it, but we are the engine for changes in installing the gender equality, protecting women's rights, strengthening their role in society. And if we have friendly NGOs working in the same area, they know quite well they can come to us. We'll cover the story in our media. Probably the audience will have something to reflect about what we've discussed today. I'm Hanna Krasnostup from the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy. Our today's event is the continuation of the previous efforts, so more to come. We have heard today what needs to be done, especially in the regional dimension, and we will come up with the work plan on communications on gender equality together with the institutes of civil society, our development partners. So all of us present here today, thank you for all your help in running this survey, because I know that lots of experts from your particular organizations were involved, so more to come. We're not stopping. We will continue the systemic work on improving communications on gender equality, and thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well, minutes each. Let's draw some conclusions. Taras Shevchenko, Yaroslav Yurchyshyn, keynote speakers, just one or two keynotes. I'd just like to thank everyone, especially those who conducted this deep research, and TV channels for your work. We'll keep working together. I took copious notes, but I believe that media should be today what the society should be tomorrow. That's the quotes, the takeaway for me. Starlight Media, the members of collection, and the window of recovery, and others already show how the society should be tomorrow, so that the media will help Ukraine to keep evolving as a democratic state even in the time of war. So thank you, the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, that despite the huge number of priorities, this topic remains one of the key priorities. It's extremely important that the states at this level would be proactively implementing the best practices. Thank you. Yeah, and I suggest that each speaker will take floor, keynote speakers. So, Iryna Slavinska. Well, first of all, the words of gratitude. It's important to be among alike-thinking people, and those who haven't joined coalition or those who joined only on paper, please stay with us, alike-thinking people. Thank you. Well, since we have some homework from today's roundtable discussion, well, this event was all about huge value that we place in this topic, and you need to have statistics, and you need to not miss when you are achieving progress and when you need to adjust some milestones. So hopefully, in addition to regional surveys, this particular nationwide survey will become regular and will help us to evaluate the progress achieved. Thank you. Thank you, Artem. Timur? Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to present this survey, for the opportunity to see it in the context of everything that has been discussed here today. And yeah, let's cover some regional media in our upcoming surveys. We discussed that with Timur, some ideas. Hopefully they will prove to be useful. Well, you are doing a great job, very valuable indeed. And we cannot become democratic society with free media only partially. And motivation is very important, and your work is a great incentive for all of us. Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for such inspiring speeches. USAID has 2 grants competitions. Speaking about next actions, well, that might be great assistance to implement those ideas. Let me add that we need to start delivering, and hopefully this particular nationwide survey and upcoming regional surveys will start demonstrating positive progress. Tomorrow, the 8th of March, the International Day of Women's Rights, so please tell women how important they are and their contributions. Thank you and goodbye.